Hey everyone, how's it going? Let's talk about The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This was published back in 2006 to great acclaim. It won the Pulitzer, among other prizes, and was made into a film starring Viggo Mortensen, better known to many people as Aragorn. And yeah, so let's talk about it. It takes place in the United States, presumably in the near-ish future, when an unidentified cataclysm has destroyed most human civilization and pretty much all life on Earth. There are no animals, or at least none appear. We do hear a dog bark, so presumably there are some animals still alive in some places. But most animals are dead. There are lakes that just have, nothing in them but the water, literally. No fish or insects or anything. There are trees made up of dead forests where the trees are all slowly toppling down. There are entire towns that are just sort of deserted, literal ghost towns. The landscape is constantly described as gray, and we don't ever see the sun because there's a constant overcast, presumably because of the cataclysm that has taken place. And even there's a layer of ash over everything in the world. And it sounds like, in points in the book, like there's ash actually falling from the sky, possibly, because Cormac McCarthy will describe a snowfall happening and a layer of snow developing, and then another layer of ash somehow accumulating on top of the snow. So there even seems to be possibly ash falling from the sky. There are a few groups of humans clinging to life, obviously, or else we wouldn't have a story. But a lot of groups of humans have taken to cannibalism, because there isn't much food left. There aren't any animals, and you can't really have agriculture on a planet where there is no food. A lot of them have turned onto the one seemingly remaining food source, which is other humans. And there are even groups of cannibals who keep women as slaves and presumably rape them and get them pregnant, and then when they give birth, they eat the babies. So it's a terrifying, horrifying world that we see here. Just incredibly bleak, both physically and in terms of what's going on and what the prospects are, because clearly the humans who are left are probably going to die out as well, no matter what they do. But anyway, the main story, centers around a boy and a man. The boy is the man's son, and the man decides that early on in the novel that he needs to take the boy south, presumably to Mexico, where it'll be warmer, because he thinks they won't survive the winter that year. And so most of the plot, to the extent that there's much of a plot, is their travel south, their trials and tribulations, their finding food, escaping from cannibals, finding shelter, and things of that sort. And they see all sorts of things along the way. They have all sorts of again, trials and tribulations. And this book is written in really spare and stripped prose. Those are the two kind of adjectives that I could think of to describe it. It was very kind of Hemingway-esque, but more poetic than Hemingway, I think. Jason of Old Blues Chapter and Verse and I were chatting about The Road on Voxer, and I think he was the one who said that the prose at times almost sounds more like prose poetry in a sense. And I just want to read one passage in particular that I really liked. It's from very early in the book. He lay listening to it's just the man sort of lying next to his son in the night while the boy is asleep and he can't sleep. Then this is the passage. He lay listening to the water drip in the woods. Bedrock this. The cold and the silence. The ashes off the late world carried on the bleak and temporal winds to and fro in the void. Carried forth and scattered and carried forth again. Everything uncoupled from its shoring, unsupported in the ashen air, sustained by a breath, trembling and brief. If only my heart were stone. So, yeah, there are a lot of beautiful passages like that. There are no quotation marks of any sort in this book. So you can see, I hope you can see that that's a page of dialogue with no quotations, and a lot of apostrophes are left off as well. And this it's sort of a gimmick. But I thought it worked in this context. The lack of the apostrophes and quotation marks made it feel sort of like a weird document, an old document that you might have found in like a cave on papyrus left by a dead civilization that you know nothing about, which I thought only heightened the feeling of what was going on and the impact of it, and sort of emphasized the fact that it looks like human civilization is going to die out at some point in the world of this novel. But anyway, I felt like this was an incredibly compelling exploration of just what it is to exist as a human. It was one of the most intense reading experiences I've had in a long time. I was gripped at times, and at times I was actually like, I was given a sort of both physical and existential angst because of this bleak situation, but also the horrifying things that the man and the boy are a witness at some points in the novel. I actually remember one particular instance where I read an event that happens in the novel that I don't want to spoil one day, and the next day I was in school trying to get work done, and I was sitting at my desk just feeling physically uncomfortable, physically disgusted at what I had read, and unable to get work done because of it when I should have been. What's the most horrifying about the stuff that happens with these cannibals is that at least I felt like I could definitely, I believed it. Like, I believed that could happen if human beings were thrust into this situation. But I think what I found most compelling about The Road was thinking about what's the real difference between the situation that the man and the boy are in this world, not just the man and the boy, but humanity in general. You can look at the man and the boy as sort of a metaphor for humanity in general. What's so different about their situation and our situation here in our everyday lives? I mean, aside from the shit show that is the world right now, in our everyday lives, what's so different from what we're experiencing and what they're experiencing? Because, they clearly live in a world where there is no real consolation or hope. Humanity is probably going to go extinct, and the man probably knows that. The boy, if he hasn't already figured it out, probably will figure it out soon. And yet they continue down the road, somehow. The man at least finds a way to have some kind of hope in this world where humanity is going extinct, and what of humanity is left are mostly monsters. But we live in sort of, when you think about it, in a similar situation. We also are all going to die. We all know that human civilization will not last forever. And with climate change, I hate to get too apocalyptic on you, but with climate change, I mean, just think about that. We're all heading towards death, though. Climate change aside, we're all heading towards death and oblivion. And we all know that everything we do is in vain. It's just covered up for us by sort of what we do in our everyday lives with our jobs and making booktube videos and reading. I just found thinking about that comparison just incredibly thought-provoking. Just one of the things that really made me stop and meditate on this novel and on life, I guess. And another interesting question that I thought the novel raised, and that I certainly can't find an answer to, is how would you react if you were faced with the world of The Road? If you were put into that world, if the same cataclysm happened, would you go on like the man and the boy? Would you find value in that? The man, we find out early in the novel that he had a wife, obviously, who gave birth to his son, and she, after the cataclysm, despaired and committed suicide because she just didn't want to live in this world. And I think another interesting question is, what would you do that if you were in this world or not? And I haven't decided whether I would or not. It would depend on a lot of things, whether I saw value in going on with life after that. But I thought it was a very interesting question. So yeah, this novel has its flaws. Occasionally the writing does get heavy-handed. There are passages that are not as nice as the one I read to you, some that are sort of a bit more out of place and really take you out of the story a little bit. But those are isolated incidents. And then there are the criticisms that Steve Donahue and the folks over at Strip Cover Lit have laid out in extensive detail recently. And I sort of agree with a lot of the criticism they give. However, I think a lot of them, to an extent, are beside the point, but also I think that when you make criticisms about the internal logic of the world that's happening or the events that take place, I think when you nitpick about things like that, you're holding the road to a much different standard than you're holding a story like the stories in the Bible, or like in Shakespeare, or Moby Dick, or anything, or Virgil, where all sorts of ludicrous things happen. All sorts of leaps of logic happen. I mean, there are tons of great literature where stuff happens that really doesn't make much sense, and yet we forgive it because it says something profound about human beings and is a good story. And I just think that we should extend the same courtesy to Cormac McCarthy, because he's clearly a great, if flawed, writer, and I think that this is just a great novel that earns a few lapses in logic, essentially. So that's my tentative brief defense of The Road against Steve Donahue and Strip Cover Lit. I'm sure it won't be convincing to many people, but there it is. So yeah, this certainly is a polarizing novel, so let me know in the comments what you think of it. Do the criticisms that Steve and Dalton and Adrian raised ruin this novel for you, or do you think that they don't matter? Do you like this novel? Do you think I'm reading all sorts of things into it that aren't there? I would love to hear from anyone and everyone who likes this novel or doesn't like this novel, or is indifferent about the novel, or has read it or hasn't read it, whatever. Anyway, that is my discussion of The Road, anyway, I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.